We continue now at the top of Daf Yud Gimel Amid Beis Meseches Horayos. This is Horayos Daf 13b. On the previous Amid, the Gemara said that mice suran ra, they have a bad inclination, and the Gemara wants to know what exactly does it mean that they have a bad inclination. And the Gemara now continues. Rav Papa Amar Rav Papa says, "Afilu shuf samara gaitzi." They even chew, they even gnaw on the handle of a hoe. Again, the idea is that they will chew on things which provide no nourishment. And the Gemara continues, Tanu Rabban, and the rabbis taught, Chamisha Devorim, Meshachrim Es Halimu. There are 5 things that cause a person to forget their Torah learning. Ha'ochel mimasha ochel achbar, if somebody eats from that which a mouse eats from, umimasha ochel chasol, or they eat from that which a cat eats from, va'ochel leiv shel behema, one who eats the heart of an animal, v'haragel bezesim, one who regularly eats olives, v'hashosa mayim shel shiurei rechitza, if somebody drinks water that's the leftover water from what was used for bathing, v'harochetz raglav zu al gabe zu, and somebody who washes his feet one on top of the other. V'yeshomrim, and some say, af haminiach kelov tachas merashosov, even somebody who places his garments under his head. And the Brisa continues, Chamisha Dvarim Meshivim Es Halimu. There are 5 things that return a person's learning, they restore his learning, that which he forgot. Pas bechamin, bread that is baked on coals. V'chol shekain bechamin atzman, and certainly coals themselves. If you heat yourself by the coals, that will also restore the person's learning. V'ochel beitzam megulgeles below melech, somebody who eats a hard-boiled egg without salt. V'haragil b'shem and zayis, somebody who regularly consumes olive oil. V'haragil b'yayinu v'samim, somebody who regularly consumes wine, and b'samim, which are spices. V'hashosa mayim shel shiurei isa, and somebody who drinks the leftover water from dough. V'yeshomrim, and some say, afatova letzbo b'melech v'ochel, even somebody who dips his finger in salt and eats it. And we will note over here that the Mesoras Hashas says, B'chol asfarim yeshanim hagirsu b'gemara v'rashi Talmud b'chol ha'amud. Every time that the Gemara says limud on this amud, some have the girsa of Talmud, and also the Mesoras Hashas says that the proper girsa should be yafim leTalmud. The following are good for learning. Ha'ochel paschitin, somebody who eats bread of wheat. Vein sarach lomar chitin atzman, and we don't even need to say wheat itself. In other words, instead of coals, you replace that with wheat. And the Gemara continues, Haragil b'shem and zayis. We just said that somebody who's accustomed to eating olive oil, so that restores the memory, that restores the learning. Messiah leila Rabbi Yochanan, that's a support for Rabbi Yochanan. Dam Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Yochanan says, Kashem sha'zayis mishakeach limud shel shivim shana. Just like olives cause a person to forget learning of 70 years, kach shem and zayis, so too olive oil, meishiv limud shel shivim shana, that restores the learning of 70 years. And the Gemara continues at the 2 dots. The Brisa said, V'haragil b'yayinu v'samim, someone who's accustomed to wine and spices. And the Gemara says, Messiah leila Rava. This supports Rava, Diyama Rava, because Rava says, Chamra, wine, that's drinking wine, v'rechani, and smelling spices, pikchin, that makes a person wise. And the Gemara continues at the 2 dots. We said above, Ha'tova letzbo b'melech, somebody who dips his finger in salt and eats the salt, that restores a person's learning. Amar Reish Lakish says, Uva'achas, it specifically is 1 finger. Kitanoi, the Gemara says it's actually a machlokas tanoim. Rabbi Yehuda Omer achas velo shtayim. Rabbi Yehuda says 1 finger, not 2. Rabbi Yossi Omer shtayim velo shalosh. Rabbi Yossi says 2 and not 3. V'simonech, and the mnemonic to remember this is kamitza, the kamitza, that refers to the ring finger. If you put your ring finger down, you'll have 2 fingers on one side and 1 on the other, and that's the idea. The machlokas is that one opinion says 1 and the other says 2. And the Gemara continues, Asara Devarim Kashim Lalimud. There are 10 things that make it difficult to learn. Ha'over Tachas Ha'afsar Ha'gamol, somebody who passes underneath the reins of the camel, V'chol Shekain Tachas Gamal Atzmo, and certainly if you pass under a camel itself. V'ha'over Bein Shnei Gamalim, somebody who passes between 2 camels. V'ha'over Bein Shtei Noshim, somebody who passes between 2 women. V'ha'isha Overes Bein Shnei Anoshim, and a woman who passes between 2 men. V'ha'over Mitachas Reach Rash Al Nevela, somebody who passes underneath the bad smell of a carcass. Va'over tachas hagesher, and somebody who passes under a bridge. Shalo avru tachtav mayim mem yom, if water has not passed under the bridge for 40 days. Va'ochel pas shalo bishul kol tzarcho, and somebody who eats bread, but the bread is not fully cooked. Va'ochel basar mizuhamo listeron, and somebody who eats meat from zuhama listeron, which was a certain kind of utensil. V'hashose me'amas hamayim hoveres bebeis hakvara, somebody who drinks from a stream of water that passes through a cemetery. V'hamistakel bepnei hameis, and somebody who looks at the face of the dead. V'yesh omrim, and some say afa korek sav shal gabe hakever, even one who reads the writing that's on a grave. And Rashi explains, over tachas reach shel nevela, if somebody passes under the smell of a carcass, kolomar means to say, aholech umeriach reach nevela, means the person is walking and he smells the smell of the nevela. Techol aholech umeriach, anybody who's walking and smelling, have it over tachas oso reach. It's like he's walking, he's passing underneath that smell, shareach holech viola, because the smell goes and it goes upward. Zua molisteron, again, that was a utensil. Oso kaf shebochshenes hakadera, that was the utensil that they used. They would stir the kadera, the pot, kari luhachi, they called it a zua molisteron, al shem shema avirin hazua molitztadin, because what essentially it does is it moves the film that's on the soup to the sides. That's why it was called a zua molisteron, and so again, one who eats basar, one who eats meat, from this utensil. And the Gemara continues, Tanu Rabbon, and the rabbis taught, Keshahanasi nichnas, when the nasi enters, Kol ha'om omdim, everybody stands up, Ve'ein yoshvim, ad sha'omer lehem shavu, and they don't sit down until he says to sit down. Kesha'af bezin nichnas, when the head of the bezin enters, Osim lo shura achas mikan, v'shura achas mikan, they make one row for him on this side, and one row for him on the other side, ad sheyeshev b'mekomo, and they stand until he sits in his place. Keshachacham nichnas, when the chacham enters, he was the third most important in the Sanhedrin. Echad omeid v'echad yoshev, one would stand and one would sit, meaning as he reached the Dalet Amos of each individual person, they would stand up. When he left their Dalet Amos, they would sit down. Ad sheyeshev b'mekomo, until he sits in his place. B'nei chachamim v'talmidei chachamim, the sons of chachamim and talmidei chachamim, bizman sherabim tzrichim lohem, when the public needs them, mafsiyan al rosh ha'am, they're able to step over the heads of the people to get to where they need to get to. Yotza litzorech, if one of the sages left because he needed to relieve himself, yikones v'yeshev b'mekomo, he can enter and sit in his place. B'nei talmidei chachamim shememunim aviyem parnes al hatzibor, the sons of talmidei chachamim, if their father are leaders of the community, bizman sheyesh lem das lishmoa, if they have enough understanding to understand things, nichnasim v'yoshvim lifnei avihem, they enter and they sit before their fathers, v'achoreim klape ha'am, and their backs are towards the people. Bizman she'ein lehem das lishmoa, but if they're not able to understand, nichnasim v'yoshvim lifnei avihem ufneim klape ha'am, they enter and they sit before their fathers, but their faces are toward the people. Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Tzadok Omer, Rabbi Elazar the son of Rabbi Tzadok says, Af beveis hamishta, even at a banquet, osim osam snifin, they become snifin, which means to say that they are adjacent to their fathers. And the Gemara continues, Amar Mar, the master said, we just said above, Yotzel etzorech, if the sage leaves because he needs to relieve himself, Nichnas shebemekomo, he can enter and sit in his place. And the Gemara says, Amar Papa says, Lo amru ela lekatanim, that's only true if he went to relieve himself, he needed to urinate. Aval legedolim lo, but if he needed to defecate, he's not able to return to his place, because Havale lemivdak nafshe meikara, he should have examined himself earlier, he should not have put himself in that situation. The Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, because Rav Yehuda said that Rav says, Liolam yilmad adam atzmo lahashkim ulahariv, a person should train himself that in the morning and the evening, that's when he uses the bathroom, kadesh lo yisrachik, so he shouldn't go during the day, he shouldn't have to go a far distance. But the Gemara continues, Ha'idna, but nowadays, the Chol Sha'alma, where the world is weaker, Afilu legedolim nami, even if he has to leave to defecate, he is allowed to return to his place, because nowadays we can't expect that people can go the entire day without having to use the bathroom. And the Gemara continues, we said above, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Tzadok Omer, Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Tzadok, says, Af beveis hamishta, even at a banquet, osim osam snifim, these sons are like attachments to the fathers, they sit adjacent to their fathers. Amar Rava says, this is talking specifically b'chai aviyam, during the lifetime of their fathers, b'fnei aviyam, and again in front of their fathers. And Rashi explains, Kol ha'am omdin, everybody stands up for the nasi, Kol ha'shuros kul, on all of the rows, they stand up, afilu hein meya, even if they're 100. But again, for the av bezdin, v'yosin lo shtei shuros belvad, just 2 rows, osin osan, livnei chachamim shememunim, aviyam parnes al hatzibor, and again, for the sons of the chachamim, who their fathers are leaders of the community, they are snifin, which literally means their attachments, and that means to say, shemoshivan osan, bitzad hazakanim, we have them sit by the side of the elders, of the sages, mibnei kavod aviyam, as a way of honor for their fathers, to have snifin l'zakanim, it's as if they are attachments, so to speak, to the elders, kisnif zeh shemat snifin l'kora gedola, like something that you would attach to a large beam. And Rashi continues, Amar Rava says, uv'chai aviyam, it's during the lifetime of their fathers, hada osim snifim, that we treat them as attachments, so to speak, mipnei kavod aviyam, out of respect for their fathers. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, B'mei Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, Nishnas Mishnazu. This Mishnah was taught during the days of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. That's referring to the Brisa we just learned above. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Nasi, at that time, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel was the Nasi. He was the leader of the Sanhedrin. Rabbi Meir Chacham, Rabbi Meir was the Chacham. That's the third of the Sanhedrin. Rabbi Nasan Abbezin, Rabbi Nasan was the Abbezin. That's the second of the Sanhedrin. Kiav Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Hasam, when Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel was there, Havakaimi Kuli Alma Mekamei, everybody would stand up for him. Kiav Aili Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Nasan, and when Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Nasan would enter, Havakai Mikuli Alma Mikamayu, everyone would stand up for them. Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel said, Lo bo l'mahavi hakera bein dili l'didhu. Shouldn't there be some kind of difference between me and them? And so takin hamas nisa. So for that reason, he instituted what we said in this brisa, that they're supposed to accord more respect to the nasi than the chacham and the av bezin. Hahu yoma lo havi Rabbi Meir of Rabbi Nasan hasam. Now that day, Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Nasan were not there; they weren't present. L'machar, the next day, kiyasa, when they came, chazu de lo kama mikamayu kidiragila milsa. They saw that the people were not standing up in the same way that they used to. Amri, so they said, my hi, what's going on? Amru lahu, they said to them, Hachi takin, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. This was the takana of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, that it should be noticeable the difference between the nasi and the chacham and the abbezin. Amar le Rabbi Meir le Rabbi Nasan. Rabbi Meir said to Rabbi Nasan, Ana chacham, I'm the chacham. Viat av bezin, and you're the abbezin. Naskid milsa ki lididon. Let's devise a plan like he did to us. My navidle, what should we do to him? Neimale gali uksim. We should tell him that he should teach uksim, that mesechta. The lesla, he doesn't know it. V'keven de lo gamar, and when he's not able to teach it because he's not learned, neimale. So then we'll say to him, mi malil gevuros Hashem yashmiya kol tila. So the pasuk says, who can speak of the might of Hashem? One who can cause to be heard all of his praises. And the pasuk means lemino lemalil gevuros Hashem. To who is it appropriate that he should speak the gevuros Hashem, the might of Hashem? Misha yachol hashmiya kol Tehilosov, only somebody who's able to teach all of Tehilosov. And since you're not able to teach Uksim, you're not able to teach everything, so Na'avre, so then we'll remove him from his position. V'hava ano avbezin, and I will be the avbezin, v'yat nasi, and you will be the nasi. Shaminu Rabbi Yaakov ben Karshi. So Rabbi Yaakov ben Karshi, he heard them talking. Amar, and he said, Dil mechas v'shalom asya milsa lidei chisufa. Maybe what's going to end up happening is it's going to be a humiliation of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. So Azal Yosef Achore Elise de Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, he went and sat behind him in the upper story where Rabbi Shimon Gamliel was. Pashat Garas, and he explained it, and he studied it, Vitana, and repeated. Garas Vitana, he studied it and repeated it. Amar, and so Rabbi Shimon Gamliel said to himself, Ma'idekama, what's going on over here? Dil machas v'shalom ika be midrash amidi. Maybe something's going on in the Beis Medrash. So Yoav daite v'garsa, so he paid attention and he made sure to study it. Lamachar, the next day, Amrulay, they said to him, Nesi Mar, let the master come, v'nisni b'uksin, and teach an uksin. Pasach v'yamar, so he began and he started to teach. Basar de'ukim, after he finished, Amar lahu, he said to them, Ilo gamirna, had I not learned it, ksiftanon, so it would have been a humiliation. Pakid v'afkinu mi bei midrasha, so he instructed to take them out of the Beis Medrash. Havakasvi koshyasa bepiska, they would write their questions on a note, v'shadu hasam, and they would throw their questions there into the Beis Medrash. To have a mifrak, that which was answered was answered. To lo have a mifrak, whatever was not answered, kasvi peiruke v'shadu, they wrote down the answers and threw them in. Amar lahu Rabbi Yossi said to them, Torah mi bachutz v'yanu mi bifnim, the Torah is on the outside and we're on the inside. And so the Gemara continues, Amar lehen Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel said to them, Na'ilinu, will bring them back into the Beis Medrash, miu niknesinu, nevertheless we're going to impose a penalty on them, the lo neimru shmaita mishmayu, that we're not going to say teachings in their name. Asikul Rabbi Meir Acherim, and so they called Rabbi Meir Acherim. Whenever Rabbi Meir would say something, they would say Acherim Omrim, others say. Ul Rabbi Nasan Yesh Omrim, and Rabbi Nasan, they refer to him as Yesh Omrim, some say. Achvalu bechalmayu, then they were both shown in their dreams, meaning Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Nasan were both shown in their dreams. Zilu paisu Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, go and appease Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. Rabbi Nasan azal, Rabbi Meir lo azal. Rabbi Nasan went, Rabbi Meir did not go. Amar, he said, Divrei chalomos lo malin v'lo moridin. Dreams are insignificant. Ki azal Rabbi Nasan, when Rabbi Nasan went, Amar le Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel said to him, Nihida haniloch kimra da'avuch lemahave av bezdin. Granted that the belt, so to speak, of your father helped, that you got the position of av bezdin. Shavinech nami nasi, is it also going to make you the nasi? And the Gemara continues, Masni le Rebbe le Rabbi Shimon Berei. Rebbe taught Rabbi Shimon his son. Acherim omrim, others say, Ilu haya tamura, if it was a tamura. And Rashi explains, Masni le Rebbe Reb Shimon Berei Acherim Omrim Ilu Haya Tmura Lo Haya Karev. Acherim say, others say, and again as we said, that generally refers to Rebbe Meir. Others say that if it was a Tmura, it would not be offered. To Tanan Meseches Bechoros Beperek Basra, because we learned in the Mishnah in Bechoros in the last Perek, Kara La Tashi Asiri Vela Asiri Tashi, Well Yacharos or Asiri, if he calls the 9th one the 10th, and the 10th one the 9th, and the 11th one the 10th, that's talking about Meiser Behema, and so he counts it out wrong and calls all 3 of them the 10th. So Shloshler Mekudashan, they all 3 of them have holiness. Hatashi Nechel B'mumo, the 9th one is eaten with its blemish. V'asiri Meiser, the 10th one is Meiser. V'achar Karev Shlamim, and the 11th one is brought as a Shlamim. V'yoseu Tamura, and it makes a Tamura, Divrei Rabbi Meir, that's what Rabbi Meir says. Amar lo Rabbi Yehuda says, V'chayesh Tamura osa Tamura, if it itself is considered Tamura, can a Tamura make another Tamura, another substitute as an offering? V'hakaimulan de'ein Tamura osa Tamura, but we've established that one Tamura cannot make another Tamura. Kedetanan b'Meseches Tamura be'Parakama, that's what it says in the first parak of Tamura. Ach b'chor shor kodesh hein kraven, vein Tamurasam kraven, u'maiser yolef evra mi b'chor, ksiv hacha kol asher yavor tachas hashavet, u'ksiv hasam b'b'chor, v'avarta kol peterechem, you learn through a gzeir Rashava Meiser from Bechor, and so that's the response over here. The response over here is that the Acherim say, if it was a Tamura, would it be offered? Meaning to say, it doesn't really have the status of a Tamura, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Yudalid Amud Aleph.